A quick thank you to all of my Patreons, and a special shout out to Lemu, Firebringer Axel, and Enigma Desu for pledging the higher tiers. Your support is heavily appreciated. Hey guys, welcome back. If you couldn't tell by the title, this is part 2 of a guide I'm making for Key as a franchise. If you haven't seen part 1, you should really do that, as over there, I talk about what Key is, why I think you should give it a shot, and most importantly, about the many different works that the company has already made. For those who have seen it, as promised, in this part, I'll be giving my more personal recommendations for entry points into the franchise, some other stuff like future content that the company has got in the works, as well as some alternate visual novel recommendations that have loose links to Key that might tickle your fancy if you become a fan. With that being said, let's get into it. So, when it comes to getting into Key itself, there are two main mediums I'd recommend focusing on: visual novels and anime. Key is generally a visual novel creating company, and a good portion of their works are done notably better in their home medium. And even more, there are a few works that are visual novel exclusive, so it's always preferable if you start there. However, I also won't deny that anime as a medium is also a much easier way to get into franchises, and is far more enticing for casual fans. Either way, there's no problem where you start as long as it gets you hooked. The goal of these recommendations is simply to get you hooked to begin with. You might also want something that grabs your attention, because frankly, Key stories are known to be really slow in the beginning, so I'll be focusing on those factors. I'll start with anime recommendations, since that is an easier medium for casual viewers, and most viewers I know enjoy an anime more than a visual novel. The first one should be pretty obvious. KyoAni's Clannad is heralded by many different people as one of the most emotional stories in anime. Clannad does have a slow start in the first 4 episodes, but once it picks up, it's a really strong high school drama that really goes hard in the second season. The reason I'd recommend the anime before the visual novel is because, as I've said before, the visual novel has a lot of excess content, such as compulsory side stories that don't serve massive purpose in the narrative. Like, seriously, what was the point of the Komura route? So Clannad's anime actually does trim down a lot of that kind of fat, making it generally a better experience for a first viewing compared to the visual novel. So if you want to see one of the most beloved emotional anime ever made, Clannad will be a very easy and fantastic choice to begin with. Second is KyoAni's Kanon, for very similar reasons to Clannad. Since Kanon is the first Key work, it is a fantastic way to understand the tone of the franchise. Not to mention, the anime in my opinion is a very good upgrade to the visual novel, with an ending arc that improves on the ending of 2 different routes at the same time, while adding a bit more for a truly powerful finale that the visual novel never achieved. So, if this story of memories interests you, don't worry, because this anime is a fantastic entry point for any beginner. My final recommendation is Little Busters, for the simple reason that it's the most well-paced. Little Busters' common route in the anime is spliced between the character routes, so what is usually a slow build-up in a Key anime is turned into a much more enjoyable experience on a first watch, as you slowly meet the different gang members over time instead of having them all come together at the beginning. Also, the anime doesn't really top the visual novel in a lot of aspects, so if you become a fan of this anime, you'll be even more enticed to read the superior visual novel to see what content is done better there, and will likely become all the more attached to it, as I did. If Little Busters did happen to catch your fancy, you should absolutely pick this anime up and experience a second adolescence with one of the best casts I've seen in fiction. Next we have visual novels, and I have 2 general areas for what people might want to go for.
これは遠い遠い時代のお話。プラネタリウムはいかがでしょう?
First off, I'll recommend Planetarian and Harmonia, for the simple fact that they are really short and thus don't take up a lot of time while still being a complete Key experience that people can enjoy. I personally prefer Planetarian and also consider it to be a much stronger story, but Harmonia is more indicative of what Key storytelling tends to be like, so pick whichever one interests you more, as both are short and also well worth the money you can pay. They're on Steam for very cheap, so there's really no excuse to just begin with there. And with Key's future releases, it seems they're going to be pushing their kinetic novel agenda even further, so why not? All of the short stories are waiting for you. But what if you don't want a short kinetic novel and want a full-on Key visual novel experience with roots in classic storytelling? Well, I got one perfect answer for you. Summer Pockets, being Key's latest work, is not only the most visually appealing, but also the most refined. While it arguably isn't considered Key's best, it definitely shows off the powerful storytelling this franchise is known for very well. Not only that, but Summer Pockets doesn't really have a common route. Instead, it has map choices similar to a visual novel like Fate Hollow Ataraxia that will determine the route you get on. This means pacing is far faster than any other Key work, and that slow common route that most people dislike about Key isn't present. So if you want to start with a larger visual novel, come over to Tori Shirojima, as I'm sure you'll enjoy the summer vacation. And I speak from experience when I say, this is one you'll never forget. Now with those recommendations out of the way, I hope you can now go off and enjoy a Key work or two. And if you do end up liking them, absolutely feel free to dive into more. After all, there's nothing quite like Key than Key itself, right? Speaking of more Key, this company ain't stopping anytime soon, and of course, there's always more content coming out soon. In fact, Key's got not 1, not 2, not 3, but 6 whole works in the back burner, all which are coming out sooner or later. So I might as well cover all I can and tell all of you about the stuff that's yet to come. So without further ado, let's go over the Key work that we can expect in the upcoming year or two. First off is the most recent reveal, Prima Doll. Prima Doll is a mixed media project about a world after a war, where automatons that were made for the war begin looking for homes and jobs in a post-war land. Is it just me, or does this sound really similar to Violet Evergarden? So far we have one song and an ongoing web novel online, but otherwise the project hasn't really properly taken off, so we don't really know much about it nor of its goal. The girls are really cute though, and I'm really charmed by the main heroine. Second is Heaven Burns Red, which is a mobile game written by Maeda himself. We don't know much about this other than the fact it's planned to be a mobile game RPG, and $5 is gonna be another gacha game, but it looks cool, and if nothing else, the songs for it are really good. Before I Rise quickly became one of my favorite songs of all time, and I'm serious when I say that. It's really good. So I'm looking forward to this. And finally, as I've said before, Key is also making 3 whole kinetic novels, similar to Planetarian and Harmonia before it. They're apparently shorter stories with no choices, all which have their own unique settings and all which are done by different writers and illustrators. They were revealed on a stream with codenames Project Looper, Project Lunar, and Project Porter. First off is the only one we have real proper information about. Project Looper ended up being revealed as Loopers, written by Ryuki Shio 7 and illustrated by Mochizuki Kei. It follows a group of treasure hunters who get stuck in a time loop that lasts one day. As they meet other people trapped in the loop, they join forces and try to break out of this time prison. Loopers seems very interesting, and it also absolutely does not sound like the premise of a typical Key work. But I'm interested in seeing how they include the emotional aspects that the company is known for into the plot. Although, if they don't, I wouldn't be that sad either, cause just by the premise alone, this seems like a really fun experience, and the art is super good. Mia is adorable, I already like her. Second is the still unnamed Project Lunar, written by Takeshi Matsuyama, which will be about a boy who plays a virtual reality game who ends up finding himself in a mysterious area called the Lunar World, where he meets an avatar named Lunar Q. She reveals that she was a rejected mascot character and has never actually been to Earth, and once in so often dreams to see it one day. This feels more familiar to something Key would do, but also a bit different. There's nothing to really comment on yet since there's hardly anything about it revealed, although it is interesting. There has been an interview about Lunar about how it talks about VR gaming, so it may have a bit of a modernist aesthetic similar to the anime original trilogy, but I'm honestly really interested in the full long-distance relationship and also the ideas of dating an AI. And apparently, the writer and director of this project are also fans of Key, so I'm looking forward to this. This has potential. Finally though, is what I'm personally most looking forward to, Project Porter, written by Romeo Tanaka. This work will be in a post-apocalyptic world where machines have taken over, and will be about a man called a transporter who's given the role of transporting a naive robot girl. It'll be a story about their journey to see a space elevator, where it's rumored that androids who reach the top of it can somehow become human. If it isn't obvious, this final work has a lot of similarities to Key's previous kinetic novels, Planetarian and Harmonia, being once again in a post-apocalyptic world with a theme of robots. What makes me excited about this project is this link, as it's the final entry into what Key now calls their robot trilogy, which, coming up from Planetarian and Harmonia, will all share these short, sweet, emotional tales in a post-apocalyptic setting, with a theme of robotics and their contrast with humanity. It's safe to say, if you are a fan of Planetarian and Harmonia, this Project Porter thing is something you should be really looking forward to, and I, for one, would be right there with you. I'm extremely excited to see this new work, and being a fan of both Planetarian and Harmonia before it, I'm truly looking forward to this story of a transporter and a cute robot girl. What else could I want? Key is also in the process of making one more other work, but details of that have yet to be revealed. However, I'm pretty sure I've heard somewhere that they've mentioned it'll be revealed once things get warmer, so maybe it'll be revealed in spring or summer. Either way, look forward to it. By now you should be aware of all the keyworks in existence, and are free to go out and consume everything the company has to offer, or will offer in the future. But what if you're like me, and have consumed all you can with Key? Now we're left with this dark void of emotion, and want to consume a few stories similar to it. Then don't worry, because I have a couple of recommendations for you on that front as well. First off, we'll be going a bit far back in time to a very obscure branch company called Tactics. Now what's special about Tactics is that a lot of its staff were actually people who would later go on and create Key as a whole. This includes their main writer, Jun Maeda, their main artist at the time, Hinoe Itaru, and Key's main composer, Orito Shinji. Tactics made Eroge, so all of these visual novels are R18. They made 3 visual novels with Key staff, all which are quite underground but still worth talking about, so let's go through them one by one. First off was Dousei, from early 1997. Admittedly, I don't know much about this visual novel, and to be honest, most of the people watching this probably don't either, because it isn't translated and the links to Key are very loose. It's meant to be a Minukige that follows a newly wedded couple as they start their new life together, facing stuff like finding jobs, paying for taxes, and very occasionally having sex with each other. So basically after story, but less wholesome. This is clearly just made for horny people that want to jack off, but I decided to mention it since it does exist, and is technically the beginning of it all. Their second work was Moon, made in late 1997, and this was the first visual novel that was written by Jun Maeda. Where do I begin with this? Moon is the story of a girl named Ikumi, who joins a cult to avenge her late mother along with other girls who join the cult for similar reasons. Moon is one of the strangest visual novel experiences I've ever had in my life, and I don't know if it's a positive one overall. If you think Jun Maeda was always a cute, wholesome writer, well, Moon's gonna shatter that image really fast. I'll just say it straight up. Moon has the plot of one of those fucked up fetish hentais. Piss, scat, masturbation, basically that kind of stuff is what you should expect from this cursed piece of history. The H scenes are prevalent and are not optional. They are literally required for this story to work as a whole. I'm not kidding, you have to suffer through this. That being said, there are actually moments of what you'd more expect from Key. There's a general undertone of family and the lengths that people can go for their loved ones in the stories of the side characters, as well as a general message of self-acceptance and self-improvement as well. So despite of all its fucked up content, I can, unironically, recommend Key fans to try Moon if you're able to stomach the fucked up nature. I go way into more detail with my review of it, so check it out. Finally, we have the one that I really recommend. The final Tactics visual novel by upcoming Key staff released in 1998, called One to the Radiant Season. One follows the daily high school life of Kohei as he meets some girls and spends his days with them. It's really that simple. One is essentially a basic slice of life dating sim for the most part, however there is a small twist in the narrative that's foreshadowed occasionally, but other than that, One is purely a character-driven slice of life story. The main focus is on its heroines, many of which have general insecurities or obstacles to overcome, like a blind girl being unable to see, or a rough-tempered girl who wants to become more feminine. It's this, along with its nostalgic, comfortable atmosphere, that makes One an extremely enjoyable read despite its age. One is by far the most similar to Key out of the 3 Tactics visual novels, and is in fact what laid the foundation into what would become the Key formula that they would then coin with Kanon. It's definitely a unique curiosity, And if you enjoyed Key's older works, specifically Kanon, you'll definitely find it's worth giving 1 a read. 1 is the quote-unquote biggest of the Tactics trio, and did actually get some anime adaptations as well as a sequel. The first anime was an OVA, which is honestly kind of terrible. It's all anime original content that clearly did not have an understanding of the characters or of their stories. It is more of a vague collage based on 1 rather than actually having anything worth watching or talking about. Unless you're a really big 1 fan, this is just one that you should just skip entirely. The second adaptation is a 3-episode hentai that's a bit more accurate to the original story, but still kind of terrible by nature just because it has to adapt a route per episode and then only has 3 episodes. So just skip the animes, they are not worth it. 1 sequel is called 1-2, The Eternal Promise, and was released in 2002 by Base Sun. It's set in the same general world but with new characters, and it tries to explain how some of the more supernatural elements of the original story worked. However, while I say this, literally none of the original staff have worked on it, and it's really hard to see this as a real sequel. It just doesn't feel like one. It's not even translated, so I wouldn't bother with it unless you really liked the original story. Now finally, my main other recommendation is a strange little visual novel made by Studio Mebius in 2003. Mebius is another branch of visual arts, however their content is a bit more disturbing. However, this visual novel was made in direct response to Key's success with Kanon, and thus takes a bit of a different tone compared to the usual Mebius fare. This visual novel is called Snow. It follows a boy named Kanata who goes to a rural village to help his cousin with her ryokan inn. He used to visit this village when he was younger, however he also doesn't remember much about it. The village constantly receives a lot of snow throughout the entire year, and a local legend depicts the cause being that a dragon once fell in love with a mortal man from the village, which was an act of strict taboo. The general plot is slice of life, very similar to that of Key. However, it also has elements of lore and mystery, especially relating to how the legend affects our main cast and how it also links into their lives. Snow definitely has influence from Key, especially with the atmosphere, heroine personalities, and of course, drama. However, compared to Key, I wouldn't say it's as powerful in the latter aspect. Snow lacked things that you would normally expect from Key, such as powerful life-enforcing messages, and the appeal rather comes from other aspects. Remember Suzumoto Yuichi, the person who wrote Planetarian, Air Summer Route, and the Utawareru Mono Mask games? He joined this project as an assistant writer despite not actually being part of Mebius, and his touch gives the story a feel that's very similar to his more rule-based works, specifically Air Summer Route. So I say, if you liked that aspect of Air, you'll probably end up loving this visual novel as well. Although I do have to mention that it isn't translated, and I actually read this one using Bing Translation. So where's the English patch, guys? Snow also received its own sequel called Tomodachi Ijo Koibito Miman, or Tomokoi, which acts as a sequel that focuses on Meiko Tachibana. Similar to 1-2, despite having the same setting, virtually none of the original staff worked on this sequel, so the tone and general appeal feels quite different. I haven't read this cause again, it's not translated, but to my knowledge, it's far more lighthearted, comedic, and also age scene based compared to Snow. So it's really different, but if I'm mentioning Snow, I might as well mention Tomokoi as well. If you want more emotional visual novels or stories, the obvious course of action is to look for other Nakige. However, I merely wanted to cover the titles to have direct relations to Key, and also have a similar vibe to their own works. So if you wanted something similar to Key itself, those are the closest titles I can name. With that being said, that concludes this guide for Key. I hope this was informative, as I really tried to cover every work I possibly could, and give the best recommendations for a beginner. If you're interested and choose to check one of these works out, feel free to tell me about what you think of them in the comments, and for already existing Key fans, what works do you consider a favorite, and why? I could go on and on about how much I love Key and how much it's changed its life, but I think I'll save that for another video. For now though, with my job done, I'll simply take my leave, and hopefully I'll see you all somewhere else on the internet. Until then, take care.